Yeah, thank you so much, Joshua. Yeah, really glad to be here with everyone. Um, so, yeah, I'll start by saying that I am by no means an expert in grief, but I've had the chance over the course of about 4 years to support family and friend caregivers and their loved ones, both with community-based hospice and in my current role with Family Caregivers of BC. Um, I've had the honor of supporting families both early on in their caregiving journeys as well as at the end of life, and have had the privilege of witnessing challenging moments, intimate moments, moments of acceptance, resistance, joy, sorrow, and really everything in between. Um, and so for me, witnessing and reflecting on grief has really been a big part of this journey. Um, it's really led me to look at grief more broadly and really to hypothesize that our relationship with each experience of grief really helps us to understand and to inform the way that grief becomes alive in us, how it moves through us, and really how it helps us grow and transforms us in our relationships to each other, but also to ourselves. So really what I hope that everyone can take away from today's session is to understand how to recognize different forms of grief that can show up in caregiving, and also really importantly, how to embrace community support in the grieving process, and then also to be able to prepare for transitions in caregiving and beyond. So, Josh, do you do the poll or do I, or everyone
So,
does it themselves?
so it started, so that's great. So yeah, please rate your current knowledge of today's topic, and then we'll be able to also put up the same poll afterwards, just so we can get an idea of the impact that this has.
Looks like a lot of people know the drill. They've done this a few
But
times.
yeah, it seems like it. And so everyone has answered, and so or a lot of people have answered so far. So I don't know, can you see it, Aaron, on your end?
Uh, I can, yeah.
Okay, good.
Should I share anything that's popping up or?
Yeah, it's just a realization that most people are 74% were in the somewhat knowledgeable.
Hmm,
4% not at all knowledgeable, and 22 very knowledgeable.
nice. Well, I hope that we get some good questions that go along with this, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see the results at the end. Okay. Um, should I click on share results or do we just carry on? Oh,
Yeah, I think you just carry on.
okay. Um, okay. Okay. So yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about building a relationship with grief. So yeah, grief is really something that's all around us. Uh, we are grieving, we're probably grieving something in some way almost every day. But the bigger things that stand out, we grieve the loss of a job, the loss of a relationship, um, changes in identity. Maybe we grieve our youth as we get older, or the change in ability. Um, and so really, the more we're able to acknowledge and build this relationship with grief, I feel that it really helps us to have a healthier relationship with all forms of grief in the long run. So when we talk about caregiver grief, there's some bigger things that do stand out. So there's obviously when there's the diagnosis of an illness, or it could be the loss of an ability, or maybe there's been an accident. Uh, these are really big life events that they do lead to us grieving something that changes in either our relationship to the person or our relationship to things that person made possible in our lives. So examples are, a change in identity. It could be that there's an adult child that suddenly becomes the caregiver for their parent, and they experience this kind of role reversal, and that can be very, very emotional, very difficult for both people involved. And so, care recipient obviously is going to be going through their own grief as well. They may be similar, they may be different. They're obviously going to have their own unique experiences. But we also have things like there may be future plans, there might be a retirement plan that's no longer able to happen because of how things have changed. And our reaction to all these things are also a form of grief. Could be also, you know, having to leave work, a very meaningful career, having to leave that behind to go caregive at home. There will be challenging emotions and transitions that are going to happen with all of this. A lot of people are probably familiar with the term anticipatory grief. And so this is, you know, the idea of anticipating what's going to happen over the long run. If it is a life-limiting illness or a degenerative illness, then, you know, there will be grief in most cases about that future that will eventually come. But the reality is for caregiving, sometimes people do get better. So that's not always going to be part of someone's grief journey in every instance of caregiving. And then it's really just important to say that grief does look different for everyone. No two people will ever grieve the same. Even when it's the same conditions, grief can look very, very different. So, you know, we live in a society that really values independence, where we feel like asking for help might be seen as a weakness. We might worry about being a burden to others. And I think the reality is in our society, a lot of people do struggle with self-worth and have some discomfort around being vulnerable. So what ends up happening is that a lot of people end up keeping their emotions to themselves. It gets locked up inside. And when this happens, you know, these emotions can get compounded. There's also the reality that we don't witness or practice caregiving and grieving, and we don't regularly witness death. And there are some cultures, and maybe more so in traditional cultures with extended family communities, where this would have been a more normal part of everyday life. And so by missing out on that, it's you know, it's led to things like death being a significant taboo, and the fact that caregiving is associated with death, it often ends up being a taboo topic to speak about openly. So yeah, I think it's a valuable reflection to think about how we've lost touch with the cycle of life. You know, birth is a very normal thing for us. We celebrate birth, we gather around birth. Do we do that as much around caregiving? Do we do that as much around death? It's not always the case. So really my favorite line that anytime I'm given a chance to speak, I always like to bring this up, that I really believe that it takes a village. Just as it takes a village for a child to raise a child, so it takes a village for caregiving. So it takes a village to look after people all the way up to end of life. And so, you know, in our society, living in more of these nuclear family households, or in many cases living alone, we don't have those built-in support networks of our extended family or our community systems around us. So the reality is that we do need to make caregiving a bit more of an intentional process. We have to create that village around us. And fortunately, there are supports that are out there, and you know, our organization, as well as Joshua, your organization, we are part of that village, I'd like to think. But also, like, we really encourage caregivers to learn to ask for help, and to know that it is vulnerable, but a lot of the time people really do want to help. It's a beautiful quality of human beings that we're these compassionate beings, that when we see someone that's suffering or see someone that's struggling, we do actually a lot of the time want to help if we can. So we do always encourage that. And I do like coming to this idea of when we deny help, if someone offers us help, we're actually denying their opportunity to exercise generosity and compassion. And it's just that very beautiful quality that human beings have that I think we do need an outlet for, and that we find very rewarding, and that it creates that sense of community by practicing it. So at Family Caregivers of BC, we often talk about this concept of creating a circle of care for caregiving. And so when you think about the circle, you have your formal and you have your informal supports. So you have the more obvious formal supports, like maybe your family doctor, maybe you have a social worker, or perhaps you have home and community care coming to the home. So those are your formal supports, and then you have your informal supports like family, friends, neighbors. Maybe you have your pets; they're doing some work themselves there. Um, and so the idea with creating a circle of care is to, think about all the people that might be able to help you with anything from the most mundane task to the most demanding task. So, maybe you have a neighbor that can help bring in the garbage, or maybe you have a family member that can help you with some financial affairs. So creating a list, and then having a list of all these potential people, and then having a list of all the tasks that you need help with, and then trying to match those up. And it can be really helpful to do this in a visual way. There's actually a very helpful tool that Pallium's put together, and I knew about this before I knew about their echo sessions. That they actually have this Atlas Care Map toolkit, which if you go to their website, they'll give you a whole bunch of, yeah, basically a guide for how to create one of these care maps, and you can visually set it up so that who are your strong connections, who are your formal and informal supports, all of these things, and really when you map it out like that, it can just kind of help you fill in the gaps where you don't have support and build that circle around you. And so there will be a follow-up email after this session, and there will be a link to this particular toolkit to check out. Another big thing that we talk about is advocacy. So Family Caregivers of BC, we are quite involved with advocacy in various ways. One big thing that we have been involved in is to advocate for the needs of caregivers with healthcare providers. So a big part of our initiative has been to educate healthcare providers on how to identify and refer family caregivers to our service. But we also work with caregivers that we support on our support line or in our different programs. We talk a lot about helping them self-identify as a caregiver, because we can go about our lives doing a lot of tasks that we think, oh, this is just my responsibility. But when we help caregivers self-identify and when we help them speak up for their needs, it can make a big difference. So just to give an example, say you have home care at home. Maybe you have some personal support workers coming for 2 hours, 3 times a week, but you're spending 50 or 60 hours a week doing stuff yourself. And maybe a lot of those things you think, oh, it's just part of my task. But it's draining, and over time it can overwhelm you and it can lead to burnout. And so we often coach caregivers to just understand that they need to speak up for the thing, not only their care recipients' needs, but the reality that's in the home, that when they have more support, they would be able to sustain their role with greater resilience. So I highly recommend that you just kind of take stock of what responsibilities are you involved in, how does this affect your energy levels, where can you speak up for yourself. And sometimes it means asking and putting a bit of pressure, and not always being passive about it, because sometimes you do have to fight for a bit of extra support. This can also happen, like if you're in the hospital or something, if you don't readily see that you're being identified and included in conversations around care around your loved one, to be able to speak up and make sure that you're included in care plans, make sure that you're included around the discharge plan, things like that. That's a thing that comes up quite a bit. You can see Raul is trying to make an appearance here, but he's being a little shy. Another thing that I'll add to this is just the topic of boundaries. So this can come up in various ways. It often comes up with a care recipient. It can come up with different family members, or really anyone involved in care. But I'll just use the example of the care recipient. where there can be situations where you feel overly responsible for the care recipient's experience. So it could be a situation where you're feeling guilty, where maybe the care recipient is not giving you the time to take care of yourself, or you feel guilty for considering taking time for yourself. These are things to look at because the reality is over the long term, by looking after yourself and by protecting your own well-being, it's going to make you more resilient as a caregiver over the long term. So boundaries is really a topic that we get into a lot. That we could easily have a whole session around boundaries, but I'm not going to get into that. But it's just something to reflect on in terms of what experiences or what are interactions lead to you feeling like you're overextending yourself, and what can you do to protect your energy so that you have more to give over the long term. So I would say one of my favorite supports that we offer for caregivers and that we encourage caregivers to get involved in is peer support. I would say that caregiver peer support groups is another very effective way of creating this sense of the village, the sense of community. It's a place where you can go where you're with people that understand what you're going through. You don't have to spend time and energy explaining yourself. I hear caregivers talk about how, oh, I had to leave my job and stay home to take care of my loved one. And when I tell my friends about it, they're like, oh, you're so lucky you don't have to work. You get to stay home. And they don't understand the full-time job, the stress, the tears, everything that goes along with it. And you get people showing up in support groups and someone shares their experience and everyone is just like, oh my God, like these people actually understand what I'm going through. And it's just being able to, be with that community of kindred spirits and be able to hold each other's grief, hold each other's emotions. And I've seen these groups where they've met maybe a couple of times with each other, and the friendships and stuff that blossom out of these support groups is quite amazing. We have both in-person and virtual groups with family caregivers of BC, but we also we maintain a directory of over 30 different organizations across British Columbia that have caregiver support programs and support groups. So we definitely encourage caregivers to look for those opportunities to connect with us for those opportunities, and I'll tell you a little bit later on how you can do that. So something that's quite personal to me, I guess where I feel most called to in this work is looking for opportunities to create meaning. So I'll kind of put on my end of life doula hat for a moment, and just talk about how meaning is an opportunity to bring acceptance to what would otherwise be a very challenging situation. One really great example is the use of creativity through the creation of legacy projects. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with legacy work, but this includes things like creating a scrapbook or recording life stories, maybe creating a book of all the pieces of advice that a loved one has given in their lives, or maybe it's your grandmother's all of her best recipes put into a recipe book. It can take many different forms. It can be experiential. It can mean if the capacity is there to go and do things that have been on a bucket list. And really, legacy work is focusing on finding meaning on the life that's been lived, as well as the time that's remaining. And it's an opportunity for collaboration and connection between the caregiver and the care recipient. And people tend to find that it's an opportunity to bring more acceptance and integration in a less confronting way. I want to give just kind of a practice example, and this is something that hopefully we'll include in the follow-up as well. And this is something that I encourage people to do, whether or not you're actively caregiving or whether or not you feel like a legacy project is the right thing for you, but it's just a really helpful exercise. So it's something that I call a life resume. So something that's very similar in format to a work resume, but the idea is that all you're including on this resume is all the most meaningful experiences of your life. So for example, instead of work experience, you have life experience. Include things like any special trips you went on, maybe people you met, valuable lessons that you've learned, or anything else that left an impression on you. You can have other sections, things like things I'm most grateful for, the best advice I've received, maybe your personal motto. And if this is something that, sparks your interest, I would suggest trying it out maybe with your friends, your family, and then you can actually exchange copies of this with each other. And it's quite a meaningful activity, and it helps it helps understand the things that define someone in their life. And so another thing that I think is really important when it comes to meaning making is to have important conversations. I guess what I noted most, or one of the things I noted most when I used to work for a hospice, was seeing that a lot of conversations happened right at the very end. And if those conversations could have happened earlier on, it could have opened up a depth of experience or a depth of relationship or a healing of relationship that could have allowed a lot more time to nurture and cultivate that relationship. So this means, if there's something that you just carried with you, whether it's wanting to apologize for something, or, maybe it's been hard to express emotions, hard to say I love you, whatever it might be. Once again, going back to this word of being vulnerable and, taking these opportunities to open up. It could be asking for forgiveness. And this can really open up a reciprocal, vulnerable conversation. You'll tend to find when you're vulnerable with someone else, they'll often be vulnerable in return. And I know this is really hard and it's easier to say it than to do it, but the times that people do this, it can really take a big weight off your shoulders. And so then the last point I want to make around meaning making is really this idea that at any point in our lives, it's important to celebrate ourselves. So caregiving, it's a hard job for a lot of people. It's a full-time job. It's maybe 2 full-time jobs. And the reality is it's really easy to get caught up in your busy routines. And what you can do really is take these routines or take these ordinary experiences and turn it into something special. So it's not about carving out extra time that you don't have. It's about taking things you're already doing and just trying to make them a bit more meaningful. I'll give you a few examples. So, perhaps you're used to cooking whichever meals. Maybe one day you make a favorite meal. Maybe you put out some candles when you eat your meal. Maybe you dress up in some nice clothes, even if you're not going anywhere. You're just staying home, having a nice meal. Maybe you buy yourself a bouquet of flowers, put it out for yourself, put it out for your loved one. Little things like that, they just kind of inject a little bit of more lighthearted, warm energy into the caregiving experience. And really, this is going to be personal for everyone. So it's asking yourself what makes you feel celebrated, and then seeing if you can create that experience for yourself, even in the midst of being a busy caregiver. One thing I thought I would just quickly share as well, just circling back, it's kind of an example of capturing all of these meaning-making activities. It's an example that when I worked in hospice and I was supporting a family, they were living at home, and a gentleman was in his final months. I'll refer to him as Jack, and I'm just going to read you out a little brief story about this experience that I wrote down. So Jack was a country musician. He had a playful love affair with life. Jack had been living with cancer for many years. However, when he lost his mobility and was told he had a few months to live, he became angry and depressed. Jack's wife and daughter felt helpless watching a husband and a father lose his spark and sense of identity. However, with some guidance, plans were made so that Jack's bed would be placed in the living room, close enough to the window so that Jack could see the trees outside. Jack's guitars, photos, and favorite hats were hung around the room. When visitors came to the house, they could sit around the bed and Jack was there in the middle of it all. His wife could play his songs for all to hear, and they all smiled as a slideshow of photos from Jack's concerts and favorite life moments played on the television. Jack's final weeks were tough, but he felt like he was being celebrated and had something to share. His wife and daughter found a new role as Jack's stagehands and found comfort in seeing Jack light up when visitors came to visit. So this is just an example of things you can do to make what would otherwise just feel like a really challenging situation into something that can be more of a celebration, and a celebration while care recipient's still alive, something that brings a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning to everyone that's involved. So another thing that I like to speak to a lot is this idea of finding your refuge. Once again, we know the reality of caregiving is hard work. It can be very draining. And even when you do have a good support network, it can still get you down. Think of this idea of the overwhelm of caregiving is like a storm. And so when there is a storm, it's important that you find a place to shelter. And so how can you build that refuge for yourself? Once again, understanding that caregiving can be very busy. It's not looking to carve out hours or days at a time. It's looking how can you make the most out of the moments of time that you do have. So yeah, there's this idea of finding a space for yourself in the middle of things. So one of these is finding micro moments of joy. And these are subtle things that are happening all around us that maybe we just don't take the time to really notice and indulge in. And it's as simple as something like you're sitting at the table and a ray of sunshine comes through the window and you just stop for a moment and just appreciate that. Could be that you just look out the window and you gaze at a flower in your garden and just be still with that flower in your garden and appreciate it for a moment. Could be that you're having your morning cup of tea and just feel that warmth of that cup of tea in your hand. Maybe it's just taking one deep, fulfilling breath and allowing yourself to indulge and relax into that breath. This is also, I would say, kind of a mindfulness practice of really being still with little moments where you find beauty. And these things are happening all around us, and it's just reminding us and giving ourselves permission just to be with those moments a bit more regularly. And the reality is sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes things go horribly wrong. Sometimes the shit literally hits the fan. And in those moments, you can also find joy in acceptance. And it's just realizing I'm doing my best. I can't control everything. Sometimes things go wrong. You know what? I'm just gonna let that go. I'm just gonna accept that. Sometimes joy arises. At the least, the acceptance is gonna help bring you some peace. In terms of activities that you can do in 5 minutes or less, this is going to be once again very personal. For some people, maybe they were an avid gardener. Maybe you can take 5 minutes and just step outside and be with your garden. Maybe you're an avid reader. Maybe you can take 5 minutes to read a book. Maybe when you go to the washroom, you take your favorite book with you and you just take a few minutes for yourself. And when you pepper these things throughout the day, they can really help bolster your caregiving experience and make you feel like you are still carving out some you time, some time where you can just kind of put whatever else is going on aside and just be present with whatever is meaningful to you. And so a lot of people admittedly struggle on getting established without adding these things to their routines. So something that I like to talk about is habit stacking. And this is the idea that any new task that you want to add to your routine, you need to tack it on to something that you're already doing. So give you some examples. Maybe every time that you finish washing dishes, you know that when you finish that, that's your time when you're going to sit down and read your book for 5 minutes. Or maybe after you wash up in the morning, maybe that's your time you're going to sit down and listen to a short guided meditation. And so by building these short nurturing breaks into your day, you're really going to help to enhance your own well-being, and you're going to be able to build your resilience in your caregiving role. So can I just now give you an overview of our services with Family Caregivers of BC? So I spoke a little bit about our caregiver peer support groups. These we have I think 3 in-person groups. These are just in the Victoria area, but we have a couple of virtual groups that are ongoing that are BC wide. We have some thematic groups that get held usually at least a couple of times a year as well. And then locally, we do some journaling. Actually, the journaling, Gabi, you can maybe nod her head, but that's done virtually as well. So that would be BC wide. And then we do art therapy workshops. Those ones are local in person. Our caregiver coaching program, this is accessed through our caregiver support line. And this is for people that are having more complex caregiving situations. They can get free coaching. We typically offer 4 free 1-hour sessions that are spread out over time based on their needs. Our primary support service has been our caregiver support line. So that's a Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 4 support line where you can call in. Our caregiver support specialists, they offer emotional support. They'll help with navigating the healthcare system, with accessing community resources and accessing any sort of educational resources to help you out with your caregiving role. Our newest program is our Caregiver Navigator program, and this is available by typically by referral from a healthcare or a social care provider, and this is for more of an ongoing support. So unlike the coaching, which is limited to 4 sessions, this could be ongoing for a number of months potentially, where you're initially addressing immediate caregiver needs, but then immediately addressing care recipient needs. And once those supports are in place, being able to look more deeply at what are the caregiver's own health and wellness needs, and being able to do some action planning on that, and being able to work together over time. And then, lastly, we have our online learning center, which is quite a robust learning center. We have a lot of articles, flip books, a good collection of webinars. We have a really great podcast. I'm going to be including some links to some of the most relevant material from our learning center in the follow-up email. And I really encourage people, if they're curious, if you're thinking maybe I don't need support right now, or maybe I will in the future, just give a call to the caregiver support line, explain your situation, get some information ahead of time. Super helpful. So just going to add here that really what I started off by saying was that with my experiences when I was working in hospice care and realizing that people could have benefited from certain things earlier on, I do think it's important that we take advantage of these supports as soon as we can, because a lot of people, they do wait until the last moment when they're fully overwhelmed. And so the idea is if you're able to create a plan early on, if you're able to prepare for the unknown future, that's when you're going to put yourself in the greatest position for resilience. Um, and so really the first step is being able to have some very real conversations with your loved ones, understanding what each other's wishes are, and then being able to make those plans on how you can support each other down the road. So I mean, in an ideal world, we have these conversations when everyone is perfectly healthy. We should be having these conversations when if we're entering into a relationship, if we've gotten married. These are the kinds of relationships. The earlier you can have them, the more helpful it can be. The earlier you can have these with your parents, with other family members, the more people will know what to do when things may arise. And so just, yeah, we do make ourselves available to help you with that process however we can. There are quite a lot of supports that we can provide, so I do encourage you to come and explore it. And yeah, that's really the heart of everything that I wanted to share with you all. The last thing I'm just going to share with you here is a poem. This is really more of a quote than a poem, but it does speak more to the grief of the bereaved. But I think it helps us understand our relationship to grief a bit more broadly. So grief, I've learned, is really just love. It's all the love you want to give but cannot. All that unspent love gathers up in the corners of your eyes, the lump in your throat, and in that hollow part of your chest. Grief is just love with no place to go. So just a bit of information here before Gabi comes and shares some of her firsthand experiences. You're going to get all this as well in the follow-up email. But if anyone feels like doing a quick scan of the QR code, that will take you to our website. And there's just information on our support line. And yeah, you'll find out more about our Navigator program and all the other programs on the website as well. So maybe at this point, I'll hand things back over to you, Joshua, and maybe we have some questions.
Okay, that is great. I think we're going to wait to do questions at the end, just so we can hear from Gabi. But thank you so much for presenting all that information. It was beautifully said, and I'm glad your organization exists. And so, Gabi, I know you have some slides, so I'm not sure if you want to start.
Yes, I can start. I'm just so humbled to be here today with people who have so much expertise on this topic already. I really value the opportunity, because the opportunity to talk about my experiences continues to be part of my healing from grief and loss. Interesting, we had some pets talk earlier today, because my personal grief journey started with my pets. I'm a proud cat mama, and those of you who have loved animals know what it means when I talk about the heartbreak of losing a furry member of your family. It's one of the most difficult experiences to go through, most often because we are having to make the unthinkable decision to help them out of their pain. And for me, believing I could spare them pain was the only way I could even consider facing this situation. I've had to do it 4 times now, and each time I'd say it slayed me. I had one magical experience with my one of my kitties, who the white one curled up there on the couch, who, as I held her body, I actually saw a shimmer arise as her life ended. And I don't know what to put that down to, but I was so amazed to be present at such a moment. Um, you know, what supported me throughout all this was my friends, my community. They held me. I learned the saying that grief is the price we pay for love, some sort of echoing what Aaron's poem was about. And I knew it to be true. I just took my time coming back from these losses, from these situations, and I started back with routines. Good because I didn't have to think. But the people who wrapped around me with hugs, with cards and flowers, and I needed all that. That was what got me through. And as Erin has said, grieving is not something that you do alone. My major personal experience with grief, though, was with my mama. My grieving started in 2010 with the diagnosis of her Alzheimer's disease. A mother who'd raised 5 children, who had um, spent her teenage years in Germany during the Second World War, who emigrated to Canada with a friend to try out a new adventure, who was a nurse, who got active in her community, and who was my best friend and my supporter. And how do you cope with that loss? And on top of it, the Alzheimer's disease. Every time, those of you caring for someone with Alzheimer's disease, it's like it's the unrelenting disease that continues to take small bits of the person that you love. And a ball of grief starts to form inside, and it doesn't seem to go away. It doesn't mean that I didn't make the most of our time with her, that we didn't have beautiful memories right up until the day before she passed away. But that ball of grief is something you start carrying around, and it's a lot to carry around for 7 or 8 years. Again, what got me through was a circle of friends, my siblings. What started to help me after she passed away was knowing that she was present inside me. And I used to think that was a trite thing to say. It was a subtle shift for me, and it was huge at the same time. And I'm grateful that I have her with me forever, even on those days, still 10 years later, where I still cry and miss her physical presence. In Yiddish, there's a word to celebrate a death anniversary. It's called Yahrzeit, meaning literally year time, but it is specifically to remember the anniversary of a death. The Yiddish tradition is to cite prayers, to remember, to gather everyone who knew the person, to be with that community. And these rituals are what comforts us. There's no equivalent that I know of that kind of ceremony in our society. It's too bad, because the honoring is an important part of the grief and mourning process. I just add it now in my calendar, the word Yahrzeit, to remember that I have, as much as I have birthdays on the list, I also have Yahrzeit days on the list. And Erin, I think, mentioned some things about rituals. It's the rituals that bring me comfort now. On my mama's Yahrzeit, I set up tea for 2, and I bring out her favorite German cookies and a candle. I put her picture there. I pour us both a cup of tea, and I write to her about what's happened over the past year and what's all the news. And it's usually, I look forward to this time. I feel like we really are together at that moment. And it's just been a really important part of the rituals of remembering and being with. Now, as a caregiver for my 99-year-old dad, I know the day will come sooner rather than later when he will die. Not from chronic illness, but just graceful aging. I'm really grateful he is in care now, so that I can be the daughter again and not have to focus so much on tasks. I can balance my life a bit more, and I think that makes me a better caregiver and daughter. I'm more relaxed. I can make better decisions. I choose not to focus on the inevitable. I do those meaning-making rituals that Erin referred to. We have some deeper conversations. We still play Scrabble, and he, honestly, at 99, can still beat me. So all those moments are still a gift. We have connected in some special ways, and those will be the special memories I carry. One of my plans, in fact, Aaron, is to do a bit of legacy work with my dad, because in selling his home, we came across a whole box of photos of older people and older times in Europe. And so that's a job I'm looking forward to shortly. We're fortunate really in our community these days, in our society rather, that there's so many resources to support us in our mourning and grief. Support groups, walking grief groups, art therapy, individual grief counseling are offered in so many locations and usually free of charge. Being with others, hearing their stories and sharing ours gives a voice to our pain, and pain shared is pain lessened. Caregiver support group members are wonderful people. I witness every meeting, the empathy and caring that they bring to the meetings, and that creates such a safe space for everyone. In this atmosphere, trust grows, and people become more willing to talk about the most difficult times of their caregiving journey. They create a community that readily wraps around a person who is hurting, allowing them the space to speak, to cry, to share. It becomes a place where people can talk about the difficult stuff and know they won't be judged or criticized. They also learn that they're not alone in what they're feeling. Tears are okay, and most importantly, silence is okay. We create the space in that silence to respect the grief that the person is feeling. And it's the best thing we can do. That is true empathy. Walking beside the person who is mourning, saying nothing, but with our presence, saying everything. I facilitate a video meeting for participants from all over BC. And you might think it's harder in this format to build that sacred space. Nevertheless, it's surprising to me how the group participants still help create that safe space for emotions to flow, and they don't interrupt the silence with platitudes or expressions of sympathy. They don't have to. At that moment, the most important thing is letting the grief out and letting the mourning happen. Those tears are grief tears. Scientifically, they contain some different hormones or enzymes than other types of tears. They are necessary in the mourning process. Group participants also come to realize that what they feel and think and experience is very normal. Rather than seeing a linear set of stages of grief, which we've come to be very familiar with, it's really more of a whirlwind with changes that occur hourly, daily, and return and recycle at random. Sometimes the grief is expressed as anger or guilt, and that's all normal. And when people feel it's normal, they can feel so much better. I mean, picture an iceberg. Only 10% of an iceberg shows above the water, right? The tip of the iceberg for a caregiver, especially in grief, is the emotion that they're currently feeling. And sometimes it comes out as anger or guilt or denial. And as we explore that a little bit, we learn that underneath that visible emotion is this huge pile of grief. And it gets a little more complicated because we have people in our groups too who have not been particularly close to the person that they ended up having to care for or having to support through their final journey. And then a whole other set of complicated emotions comes out. And yet people can say those things knowing that they're not being judged. And there's very few places that you can do that in the world. So the grief and mourning is also very individualistic. No one can tell you how long is long enough or what the appropriate emotional reaction should be. The best support someone can offer is to be there with you without judgment and with quiet compassion. And support group members are not strangers to the grief process, and their compassionate presence is so helpful and healing to others in the journey. My learning over time, there's no getting over loss. I think that what happens is that grief doesn't shrink over time. I think it stays the same, but it's our hearts and our souls and our spirit that grow around it. And we grow in that process as a person as well. We grow in empathy and compassion and love. The pain is still there, but it's a little more insulated. Sometimes it gets prodded and it'll come out and hurt a bit, but over time it takes on a different quality. Had you told me that the day my mom died, I would have said, there's no way. And now I've experienced that change in the quality of grief, and I like it better now than I did then. So in the end, we it's the talks we have with others, the rituals and the other ways that we can be with our memories that will help to keep the person alive in us, to keep the person's memory in us, in our hearts, and that's the best place in the world they could reside. Thank you. And I have a little poem as well. Nothing you love is lost. Not really. Things, people, they always go away sooner or later. You can't hold them any more than you can hold moonlight. But if they've touched you, if they're inside you, then they're still yours. The only things you ever really have are the ones you hold inside your heart. Thank you so much for listening.
That was beautiful, Gabby. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit about your journey through grief and caregiving. I know there's a lot of questions I would love to ask you, but I know time is running out. But I will sort of give a moment. We'll have some time. If anyone does have a urgent question that they really want to ask right now, we'll have that. If not, we will provide Aaron's email to everyone, and you can ask questions to him personally. Does anyone have any questions that they want to? So you can raise your hand, your virtual hand, or you can put it in the chat. If not, I just have one quick question. Is there programming for children who are, I know children caregivers, Aaron, you mentioned, is there programming for children at the organization?
We did do a pilot kind of workshop for youth last year, but we're still looking at when we can offer that next. So it's not, I wouldn't say we have a regular ongoing program, but we do have resources. We are connected with organizations that do support young caregivers. So definitely encourage anyone that wants support for a young caregiver to get in touch with us.
Okay, that's awesome. And it's great that you're so like I love when organizations are trying to expand how they can support others as they sort of move forward because we're all learning and we're all like, say, I know
Mhm.
funding's also an issue in many ways, but I'm just glad that people are continuing to open their hearts and sort of see how can we do better within our communities. So I don't see any questions in the chat. A lot of thank yous to both of you, which is beautiful. I think you guys have done an amazing job today. And so we're just going to close up the session. So thank you again, Aaron and Gabby, for your time, just for just sharing what you had. And then, oh, we have to do that poll. So let's put in that poll before we end up. We want to know how if this changed your understanding or knowledge of this topic today. And so we have, some, a lot, or the most common responses. So that's amazing. And that's just, the beauty of, being able to come to this space and you both have passion for it, you both have love and empathy for the people who are going through it. So that's awesome. And then you can take this with you. Once again, meaning making is part of life and part of how we sort of walk in this world. So by giving your talk and sharing, a little piece about yourself, both of you, it really said it seemed to impact people's understandings on the topic and how they can move forward with that knowledge. So that's great. And so for
Thanks
our
again for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And then just to wrap up, when you close this, there's going to be a short survey. If you can fill that out, that'd be great. If not, we understand. And then registration for our next session in the series is titled Challenges and Resilience in the 2SL GBTQ plus community, exploring grief and bereavement through a holistic approach or framework. And that is scheduled for April 23rd at noon. So feel free if you want to join us then. Also, just to be notified of any other sessions in this series, you can subscribe to our newsletter. And our aim is to provide you with this presentation recording, any kind of notes and resources within the next 7 working days. So once again, thank you everyone for attending. It actually shows, us that this is needed, and we're going to continue to bring out topics that you are asking for. So in the survey that if you complete it, there's going to be a spot where you can sort of let us know what other kind of literacy when it comes to grief and bereavement you want to sort of hear about. And people talked about, caregiving grief. So I'm happy that we finally got to have you guys on to showcase a little bit of that. So thank you again, Aaron and Gabby, for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here.